Well, hello everyone. We have just a couple minutes before we start, but I just thought I'd show you my setup before. This is the original painting that we're going to do our painting off of. This is one of a series that I did with a lot of different fruits, and I have them hanging in my house. I've had them in different galleries before, and I just thought, because Janie, and I hope you pop in, she had asked if I would do a still life. And so I am going to do still life of pears. And I just thought it would be fun just so that you can constantly see what we're working off of and putting over here. Now this canvas, hi Carol, hi Kevin. This canvas is 12 inches by 12 inches, where of course this is a lot bigger and it's framed, but I'm actually going to start to finish this one. So feel free to come in and come out of the video and just stay the whole time if you'd like to. And I picked out a few of my brushes. I like to use flats in a lot of paintings, so I just grabbed a few. Now, if I have to take a 5-minute break, I will just put this on the easel, and so if somebody pops in, they'll know that I will be back in just a couple minutes. Things that I always do when I prepare to do a painting. We're going to use acrylic today. And sometimes I'm painting in watercolor, sometimes I'm painting in oil. And these are just a couple of the different tubes of acrylic paint that I have. There's a lot of good companies out there. And so those are just totally personal preferences on what you like to do. And I always like to start out with putting some paint on plates. The reason why plates are easy is because you don't have to wash them later. You can just toss them. And I just put a double plate so it keeps it so it doesn't dry out. Just a trick. This is a little tool that I use for if my paint tubes start to get low. And you just put that in there. Oops, sorry, didn't put it in quite far enough. And you're squeezing it. And then you crank this, and it literally pushes all the paint upward. So see how you're not going to lose any of that bottom paint. And it's a great little tool. And you can get these at almost every art supply store. It's called a tube wringer. But it's just something so you're not wasting paint, because paint can cost you a lot of money. Now, can you use the less expensive paints? Of course you can. Oh, so Kevin's at work, and so his volume is off. Well, thanks, Kevin, for just watching anyway. Hi, Karen. Good morning. So it's just a way to keep your paints. Now, can you use less expensive paints? You can. I have found that the less expensive paints, you may have to do multiple layers. Now, the first thing that we're going to do today is we are going to do what is called a base layer. And I always like to work from the back forward. And so I'm going to do this background area first. Now, one thing I have to decide is the wall that's coming down, the table that it's on, at what point do I see that? Do I want to see it at all? Do I just want to show that with the brush strokes going this way and the brush strokes going that way? Those are always just options that you get to decide. But it is right after 10, so I think we will start. Now, one thing with acrylic paint, you always have to get your brush wet first. Now, the reason why you do that is because you want the water molecules all through those little brush hairs. And I just usually dip it. I have a glass of water here. If it gets too terribly bad, I will just exchange it. Now, after you dip it, I want to shake it. Tap it on the side of your glass. Another thing to note is whatever you're drinking while you're painting, do not set it by your water, because I cannot tell you how many times I almost drank this paint water. So we are going to get started with our background. So the colors for the background I put on this plate. I have some blues, and then I have some browns. The blues can be very effective instead of using black. Not that I don't use black, because I do a lot, but if I want to have a lot of variation in my colors, I don't. So first I'm going to start with the light. And what I like to do is put paint on both sides. And you can see I drew this in marker, so it was easier for you guys to see. So I'm going to go right along the edges of the pears. Do not worry if you go over top. The nice thing about acrylic is that if you make a mistake, if you don't like something, you simply let it dry and you can paint over it. Okay, now we're having our colors on the background go vertically. And remember, this is only our first base coat. So you don't have to worry about, I have a little hard thing right there. See that? So we will just brush that off. You don't have to worry about, oh, it's not dark enough, it's not thick enough. Always remember, the very first part of your painting is a base coat. That means that you're going to put layers on top of that. And so I like to start with my lightest first. Over here on this painting, it's very subtle by the time it's finished, but it started exactly like this. And then we do layers upon layers. Now, how long will this painting take me? It will probably take an hour and a half, 2 hours. Now, I'm not going to take this light brown all the way to the edges. But I am going to take and put it under the pears, which will help with some of the shadowing later. So it makes it look like the pears are actually sitting on the plate, not floating in the air. Have you ever seen a painting and you can't really see the distinction enough? There's not enough shadow someplace. Now, depending on where you figure the light source is, that shadow could be over here, could be over here, but someplace it has to have a shadow. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is just put a little bit of shadowing right in here too. Acrylic does dry pretty fast, which is a benefit when you're putting layers upon layers. Okay, another thing that I do when I'm painting and I'm going to have a variegated color system is I try not to wash my brush out. I want it to be able to blend as I add colors to it. Well, look at here, all kinds of people popping in. And so, hello, hello, hello. I did add Nightbot yesterday because Tim over at Ridge Life said it was a good thing to have when you're busy doing one thing during your live and it can catch trolls. So when you see the Nightbot, that is there. And Nightbot does not like caps. So just so you know. But Janie is in here and she is the one who asked me if I would do the painting. So Janie, I hope this is a good painting for you. What Janie doesn't know is that because she asked me at the end, I'm actually going to mail her this painting. Okay, so let's let's try adding some other colors. So we're going to go to our next color. If your brush starts pulling, dragging, it means it doesn't have enough water molecules in between. So I'm going to just start pushing. Now see how that just changes that original color. And remember, don't worry if you go over the lines a little bit. By the time we do these pears, everything else will have dried and we can easily just paint right over it. And that's just a nice benefit. See, I'm going to put a little bit of water because it was a little draggy. And because it dries so quickly, unlike when I'm doing oils, it's easy to change, to fix, to cover up. I just think that acrylic is really very forgiving. I guess that's a good word for it. So we're just going to keep going. Now next week, on Wednesday, I'm going to paint a funky dog. And so the people that have joined, they're not just subscribers, they've actually joined as a membership with me on YouTube. They're sending me photographs. So I've gotten a whole bunch of photographs so far of a dog. And I am going to paint one of those dogs and give it to the person that I pick. I haven't picked yet. I'm not picking until Friday. So I won't know which dog I'm doing yet. But I'm going to do a fun, funky painting and it'll just be a blast. Hi, Todd. Hi, Jeannie. Hey, Jason. How are ya? Todd, how are ya? 9252. How are you today? And Farmstead Smith is in here too. Oh, the Monties must be in here. Hi, Miss Joanne. Gosh, so fun. And seriously, please feel free to come in and out. Unless you really want to know every single technique of painting, stay here the whole time. Take notes. You can always watch this video again. And it's interesting when you're painting because it's a process and never is a painting the same. I used to own an art shop and it was called Paint Your Canvas. And I'd have a painting for the night. People would come in and we would do a painting in 2 hours. So I always had to figure that I had to be able to do that painting complete in about 1 hour and 15 minutes because there's always a lot of walking around, talking, helping people. And so when I would do my paintings beforehand, I would really have to decide how much I could and couldn't do because you had to have that painting done. Let's go a little bit darker. So first I'm going to mix a little bit more in here. But the nice thing about those classes, because I always told people, change your colors up, make it your own, was that every single one of them, though they had the basic, was basically the same. So many different colors, so many different ideas. It was just fabulous. So we're going a little bit darker. See how that just starts to change it and it starts to become more like this painting over here. Now be careful though, I want you to put water on your brush. You don't want it so saturated that it wants to make your colors run, your paint run. Because that can be a problem, especially if it drips and you've already painted something down in here. It's not just a matter of drying. Sometimes you have to even paint, let it dry, add some white, and then start again on that section. And it's just one of those weird things about acrylic. Now, I always like to put a sealer on my acrylic. So I always let it dry 24, 48 hours, and then I have a spray sealer. And I do have actually one that I can brush on too. But see how that starts to change the richness of a painting. Oh, Gail Southern Living is here. Doug from His Way Homestead. Hello. How are you guys? So nice of you guys to stop by. So now I start grabbing all kinds of colors because I really like the variegated part of it. And remember, because this is the wall, we're always taking our brush up and down. Now, if you find that you have stop and start marks, the best thing to do is do a continuous and just fly off the canvas. It's like an airplane lifting off. Because otherwise, if you stop, see how you get that mark right there? And you don't want that. You want it to be natural. And we're just going to work our way on the other side. Now you'll find that different paints feel different. Some of them feel very rich and creamy. Some of them won't feel as thick. It doesn't mean you can't get that same effect. It's just maybe a matter of putting more layers on than what you had anticipated. Now we talked about me using blues instead of black. I want to show you what will happen then. And I have a couple different blues. But see how I add that? And it does give you a look of being black, but it's not black. And I just really like that effect a lot more. I'll be careful not to lose completely these little stems. If I get, it goes over part of it, it's not a problem. Because I still know where they are. And remember, anytime your paintbrush starts to drag, you need more water on there. Because it's not just a matter of enough paint. Those water molecules have to be around those bristles on acrylic. Going to add some blues over here. Now, one of the things I like to do, it's not just I want dark straight up and down. A lot of times I want it to encapsulate a section of the painting. And because this is going off the edge, it's not as large as the other painting. I'm going to not only make it come up and down over here, I'm actually going to make it real dark over all the way into this part. And then I'll just fade it up over into here. And I'll show you how we do that. But let me lay a little bit of paint down. And then I'm just going to blend. Now, sometimes you just have to stop for a little bit and let it dry. And then you can go, because you don't want to overwork it too much. But adding the blues instead of the black just gives you a richness, and it's just different than black. Oh, good. You guys are talking between yourselves. I so like that. Now, His Way Homestead was my first hot seat the other night, Monday night. And that's every single Monday, I'm going to put a different channel in the hot seat. And for 3 minutes, I'm going to tell you all about that channel. And I do hope that you go over and subscribe to them. I think you will find the ones that I'm picking out fabulous. Now, once I blend this little section right here, and I do need to pull it over a little bit over into here too, because I do not want it to look like striped background. I'm going to let that dry for just a little teeny bit, and we're going to do this bottom. And so the plate is actually going to come across here, and it will come across over here. That looks very funky on the computer screen. It's interesting how the camera picks up different colors than what I literally see. In fact, when I used to teach classes all the time, when people were doing their paintings, I would suggest to them that you really need to take photographs as you go, because what you see and what is actually there can be different. And so it's always better to look at those photographs and say, oh, I didn't see this. I need to correct this. It's an easy way, and lots of artists use it. Okay, I am going to let that dry for just a little bit. And we're going to do down here. Now, in this painting, it's very much the same colors, but you wouldn't necessarily have to do that. Maybe you have a tablecloth on that table. It really depends on what the feel and what you're trying to accomplish in that painting. I'm just going to blend that a little bit more. It was a little streaky, and I don't like that. I mean, I do want the variegation of it, but I just don't want it to be streaky. Now, see, I can still see a little bit of the stem here, but this one I really can't see much of. It doesn't matter. I still know where I want to have my stem. So now we're going to go horizontally instead of vertically. Hi, Lala Farms, how are ya? So fun. I can't pop over in the middle of, oh, I can see that there's 14 people in. If you haven't put a thumbs up, I would appreciate you guys putting a thumbs up. So let's start again. Base colors. I'm going to move my water out of the way, and I'm actually going to lift this up so it's on top instead of in the ridge, because I want to be able to get the edges. If you're going to put this in a frame, you don't have to do the sides. So Janie, since it is coming to you, do you want me to paint the sides, or are you okay with it not being painted? Just type it in there and I will know. Okay, so we're going to start. And because it's leaning, I have to hold that some. And I'm going to go right along the edges of our plate. And if you join me later, I drew the pears and the plate in marker, so it was just easier for you guys to see. And I think I'm going to make this bottom table a little lighter, just because it'll make it more of an effect. We'll see as we come along. And as you can see, I really hate washing out my brush. I think you just lose so many of the colors, and especially if you're blending. Now, if you're going from yellow to blue, I would be rinsing them out, because you would have green. And so it's not like I never rinse my brush out, because I do. Okay, I got to lift that back up on there. So let's go a little bit darker. And I'm actually going to set this right behind it so it doesn't slip. If I can get that to go in there. That might help it from not slipping. Nope, never mind. We'll just paint lighter. I'm going to draw the edge. And then we'll just pull it up. Now, can we adjust that later? Of course we can. Okay, so it's coming along. Let's add a little bit more so that we have some contrast on the corners. Now remember, this is what we call base coat. Are these colors what the colors will look like when we're all completely done? No, because we're letting this dry while we're doing this. But it gives us a fun base that we can really work off of. And see how we can just blend it, where here we went all vertical. Now we're going horizontal. And remember, if you have stop and start marks, you just want to make it just go, and it's an airplane, and you're taking it off the canvas. And that's just an easy way to fix that. Now, I don't really worry about it too much when it's a base coat, unless it really stands out. And I guess I'm going to paint the sides. I don't see an answer from Janie. Oh, she does say, she says sides, please. Okay. So we are adding some side colors. Now, because it's sitting on an easel and we're not painting it flat, the bottom I will not do yet. But I can do the sides right now. So let's add some dark over on these ones, and we will do it on the top. And can you do the last of it at the end, your sides at the end? Of course you could. But I find it, at least if I do some main parts of it, it's just easier. And I try to still do it the same direction as I was doing the painting. So the bottom, where we went horizontally, when I paint it, it'll be horizontally. When it's vertical, it's going to be vertical. Okay, so we'll just lean that forward. Now sometimes when I'm painting the borders, I'll just do it like a black. And that's a nice contrast, and it kind of gives you that feel of, that's way too much blue in there. A feel of a frame. And remember, base coat right down. So our colors don't have to be exactly the same. But at the end, they will be the same. Now I have definitely too much blue on my brush, so I am going to rinse it out. So what I do is I literally drag it along the bottom. And I know some people say don't drag it, it ruins your brushes. But if you have a halfway decent brush, it is not going to hurt it at all. And then I want to dry it out. So I just take a cloth and I dry that out. So then I can start more with my my edge up there, because it was just too blue. And I might have to just let it dry for a little bit. That's okay. And we are going to go up. Now, one thing to remember is paint splatters. It flicks. So the idea that I won't splatter onto this painting, the likelihood is pretty high I will. Okay, so we can start doing our second coat on here. It's just a little tacky. It's not all the way dry, but it's tacky enough that it's workable. And so I want to make sure I get a sharp edge here. Now, there, I picked up a hair. So you always want to be careful of that. And see how much richer and darker that looks than this side over here when it's basically the same colors. It's just because you're putting your next layer on there. And then it starts to become more like this over here. And the amount of light and dark is really the artist's personal preference and the effect that you want to get. But I like it that in the middle, it can be lighter. I think it draws the person looking at the painting into the painting. And that is interesting to me. And Doug at His Way Homestead says it's 77 degrees. Did you set up custom emojis in my members? Doug, no, I did not set them up because I do not know how to make an emoji. And I looked at a couple different sites, and the emojis that they were showing me, I did not like at all. And so I haven't. I know that some people have those, and what Doug is talking about in the membership part, they have these emojis which represent words. So anytime your members type those words, that emoji pops up. But I haven't done that. It's, I guess it's a little beyond my expertise, and I'm going to have to watch some videos on that. I guess it's real fun to do, though. And it's not like I won't, I just haven't, Doug. Okay, so this is getting a nice rich tone. I'm liking it. Working on those sides to make them the same colors as where it runs off the canvas. I'm liking it. Okay, that I'm going to leave. Now let's do the second coat of our table. Actually, I need to tighten this up just a little bit more. Make that a little straighter. Okay, so the table is much lighter, so we're using our two light browns. See how messy my plate gets? This is a great reason why you use paper plates and you can throw them away. If I'm going to work on a painting different times during the day, I just put this lid on. It's just another plate, and it works perfect so that they don't dry out. I've tried using, you can buy these boxes that you can put the paint in. And I've tried using saran wrap or different things. This is the easiest and cheapest way to do it for me. Okay, so let's add our second coat. See how it starts to change it. Now, when I look on my computer and looking at this, it almost has kind of a green tinge down here, where when I'm looking at it in person, that isn't the case. That's very interesting. Okay, so we got to go along that edge of our plate. Now, because the plate is going to be white, we are not going to do the plate until the very end. Just because I would hate to pull colors from here and bring them up into the plate. Okay? Well, Todd, thanks for stopping by. Todd Ramey just had his birthday not very long ago. See, I'm liking that color. I'm going to leave that for a little bit. Let's work on some pears. So I am going to have to rinse my brush out just because I've been using such dark colors. So I just drag it along that bottom of that cup. Now, depending on your paint that you're using, sometimes yellow can be very transparent. When you squeeze it out of the tube, it doesn't look transparent. But when you go to put it on, it looks like you don't have a strong color. And the easiest way to do that is to add a little bit of white to it. And so I have that lid with a little teeny bit, and I have some white over here. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of that white, and I'm going to grab some of that yellow and mix it together. It'll just help with the base coat. And we're just going to cover all the pears. Even though the pears are going to be variegated in colors, I want to start with yellow. And it's just a matter of filling those spaces in that we already drew. Now this we overlapped, but that part is dry. That seems to be dry too. So we'll be okay. If your paint is still wet and you've gone over the lines, just let it dry a little bit, because acrylic dries fast and it makes it so that you can easily paint over it then. If you think it's dry and it starts to smear, you just want to leave that for a little bit. I'm going to pull that yellow into that brown a little bit, that light brown. And see how we can start to define those pears again. Now see, that's pulling in some. So I'm going to rinse my brush off and let that part dry a little bit. I'm mixing it a little bit more yellow up. And I'm covering up where we're doing that shadow, but it won't make it disappear, but we'll blend it in. Yep, see, that's pulling colors. It's not quite dry there. I'm going to dry my brush off. I'll go over here. So there, a base coat for those. I think we'll do the rim, which is blue, while we're letting those pears just dry a little teeny bit more. Now, so we go back to our plate that we had all of our browns, because we have some blues there. I'm going to rinse my brush out, because if I had yellow and I added, on my brush and then added it to the blue, I would of course get green, and I don't want that. So you always want some water molecules in there, and we're going to grab some blue. And that way we can define our plate. Now, if you want to use a smaller brush, you sure can. In fact, let's trade just so you can see that. So here's a smaller brush. I'm going to just take that around. And that lets me know where, like right here, I need to add a little more of that background. Now, does it have to be even? Now, if you look over here, mine's not even. I like the idea of things being off a little bit, a little quirky, a little groovy, a little funky. It's just, that's just something I like in a painting. Now, I do appreciate people that are very realistic and every detail is just so precise. But then, for me, you know, because these things are personal preferences, I think, why didn't you just take a photograph? I mean, I admire their technique and their ability and their patience. But I like some quirkiness in my paintings. But the more you do on a painting, the more it becomes part of the whole. It starts to take shape. Now remember, Jenny wants it painted on the sides, and so I got to take that blue around. And we need a shadow underneath that blue. So we'll have to add the darker blue. Now you could add dark purples, you could add black, you could do dark browns, anything you want to do to give it that look that it's sitting on the table, not floating on the table. So I am going to use the darker blue. And I think I need to put it in here. A little bit, it's a little bit too wet. I'm going to add a little bit darker brown right there. So I'm going to rinse my brush out. And, oh, that's getting better. It's getting a little bit drier. So let's, I'm going to go back to my big brush. When you paint, you become attached to certain brushes. And this is just one of my favorites, even though I really should just use it for watercolor. But I like it with so many different techniques, oils, acrylic, watercolor. So let's add some shadow down there. You'll find that if the paint starts lifting up, it's in that state of not quite dry enough for you to paint over it. So I'm just going to let that sit for just a Because see how it wants to lift up, and I don't want it to lift up. I want it to become a shadow. So I'm just going to have to let that sit for a minute. So I'm rinsing that brush out. And our pears need just a little bit more drying. So I'm going to put my first layer of white on here. And I'm going to be careful because I don't want it to spread into my blue. So I'm just going to get that a little bit wet. Now you can see on this painting, it's not exactly just white, but I did start with white. And one thing I did not do, let me do that real quick, is I need a little bit of blue right there. Because the plate comes around and then it ends up right here. Because it wouldn't just be white. Okay. So let's grab our plate that has white. Actually, I have a little bit of dark blue in there too. So I'm gonna get it just a little bit wet. Put paint on both sides. And that way we can start going around our shadows and around our pears. Now I'm going into the shadow because when I blend later, and remember this is just the base coat, I just need it to be able to just blend spectacularly. And I will be careful. Oh, Mary Ranch, how are ya? And Living Miracle Homestead. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I always tell everybody, feel free to move your canvas. If it's an awkward position, just turn your canvas. Whatever makes it easier for you. There's no law, rule that says you have to paint just this way. If it would make it easier for you to grab hold, like on this edge, just turn it. Whatever makes it easier for you. Now, if you paint with the marker or draw with the marker beforehand, make sure when you're painting, your colors cover all those markers up. And the base coat will help. And then your other coats will finish covering it up. But we just want to go around everything that's part of the plate. And we want to make sure that we're going on the sides too, because the plate does extend out here. Whoop, it's a little wet there. Pull that blue off my brush. See if I can lift up all that blue. If you ever have a canvas, maybe it already has a painting on it, or you buy a canvas and it's like rippled, you know, it looks like it's warped. An easy trick to fix that is to just take it on the back side, spray water on it, and leave it like that and just let it dry, and it will tighten those canvas fibers again. It's an easy trick. And I've done it with paintings that were painted already too, and it will still work. Let's see, I picked up some blue again. But you can lift it up when that's still wet. we are just going to let that sit because that blue is just lifting up still. And let's go back to our pears. Now the pears on the original painting, they start out with yellow. Some of them have some red added into them, and then some green, because as if they're not quite ripe. Now pears, if you grow pears, because some of you guys are homesteaders and you probably do grow your own pears, pears have a lot of colorization in them. They have a lot of spots, a lot of dots, depending on the variety, and it just makes them interesting. So let's add some more yellow. Now see this second coat, how it's starting with that we can cover up any of those marker lines. And Living Miracle Homestead, Nightbot is on there, and Nightbot does not like capital letters. It's just one of those things about Nightbot. And Tim over at Ridge Life recommended it just because it helps you with trolls when you're doing a live, and it can catch trolls before it happens. So I'm just learning. I only installed Nightbot yesterday, and so it's really my first live that I've experienced Nightbot. And I think Kevin over at Lazy Pond Farms does not like Nightbot, but I think it can be helpful. And the larger your channel gets, the more trolls you are going to have. And if you have moderators on a live, they may not catch something before it pops up, and the Nightbot a lot of times can. Now see how that's getting darker. I'm going to have to adjust that a little bit because that's hard for you guys to see that. It must be the light from the window coming in. I might have to adjust the shade on there, or let me pull the shade down and see if that helps with that. Does that help at all? Putting the shade down? I appreciate all you guys staying in. You know, doing a painting is a long process, but I have to tell you, the one over here, oh gosh, that must have taken me, I don't know, 15, 20 hours. But this will still turn out very nicely. Now when you start doing your second coats, it does make a difference in your brush direction sometimes. That can change. So then you have to be a little more careful. When you're first doing your first coats, so I try to keep doing the same direction that I want. It's not quite as important as it is later. Now see how this still is a little bit wet, but I'm going to pick that up and use that. I'm going to use that in some shadows. I think it can help with the coloring. Now, how many of you guys that are watching use, grow pears? How many of you have pear trees in your yard? We have several pear trees in our yard. We have 3 up in the garden section. And then over in the terraced part where it's an orchard, we have 2 there. So we have, is it a five total? I did have one in the front yard for a couple years, but I think that north wind was just too powerful for it. It was just too intense. Now I'm going to take my little brush, and there's a couple places right here and right down here that it actually needs the background color. So I'm just going to take one of the little brushes, and that way the pears can dry just for a second. And I'm just going to add some dark blue in there, just in those little corners. So I got to grab that plate. And I'm just going to just fill in those little teeny spaces right there. The nice thing about a dark background, if you're painting and you go, yeah, I just don't really like that shape, say the shape of the pear, you can come in through with the background and just really change that. You can really, maybe the pear is too elongated, maybe the pear is, you just need to change it a little bit. And that is a great way to do it using your background colors. Yeah, that's better, because I could see some of the canvas and he wasn't liking that. Now you might find when you're painting on a canvas, especially with acrylic, as it dries, all of a sudden you're seeing little dots, part of the canvas coming through. And that's just something that happens. It's just the paint wasn't thick enough there. And it's just something you can fix. Oh, that's way too light. But there's a little bit of canvas right there and right there. Okay, it's starting to come together. We'll put that lid on there on the dark colors. How many of you guys, oh, hi, Miss Molly Cakes. How are you, Molly? Molly says that she has a peach tree, but it only lived a few years. I did make a peach pie with the peaches, but in our area we get some bug that kills it. Did not have a pear tree. We have peaches also. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 peach trees. And I have to tell you, those peaches, I should have done a video on the peaches this year. They were the best peaches we had ever grown, taste-wise. They weren't quite as big as sometimes, but the taste was just like melt in your mouth. Oh, hi, Happy Farms. How are ya? So we have our background, and I'm happy with the background. I'm good with the table. I think I may just do, I'll let it dry for a little bit more. Then I think I might, nope, I think I'm going to do it right now. I think when I pulled it forward telling you about how to stretch your canvas, made a little mark right there. So I'm just going to brush that real quick, just so it doesn't have that there. Now I want to show you something else. See how that kind of skipped right there? Not enough water on my brush. So I'm just going to put a little more water on my brush. I'm not adding any more paint. And see how I can just smooth that out? Perfect. Okay. So let's take one pear at a time. Now we do need to put some stems in there. And the stems, because we have such a dark background, I have to start with a lighter color. Now, could you use white? You could, but I think I'm going to use this lightest brown. And I'm using a flat brush, paint on both sides. I dipped it in water. This one right here, this pear right here, you wouldn't see a stem, but you would on this one and this one. So then you have to decide if you want it to face out, do you want to face it in, what kind of thing, or do you want it basically straight up and down and it's not really moving much? So I think I'm going to make this one. So I'm going to start in the pear and I'm going to go up. And see how fun using a flat brush can make a great little stem there? And I'm going to turn my brush the opposite way. I'm going to spread that up over there. If you grow pears, you know that the stem is actually pretty thick, depending on the pear. Now, my Asian pears, the stem is not as thick as like the Kiefer or the Bartlett pears. Those are really stocky pears, the stem on them. So I'm going to leave that. I'm going to take a small brush and I'm going to put some blue on it. And I need to make it so it's pronounced, that it looks like it's coming out of the pear. But I don't want to do any of the side stuff yet because I'm not done with all my colors in here. But I can do a little bit of coloring onto the stem itself. And I can just let that dry. Because this would be our base coat on the stem. That one's very wet still. So we're just going to let that sit there for a little bit. Start to dry on there. And we can work on our pears. Now, since we have 3 pears, I'm going to make one with a little red, one that's got a little green on it, and the other one with a little bit of red. Now, could I do 3 separate pears, completely different? I could, but when you pick pears, they're basically the same, or you buy them at the grocery store, you're buying usually basically the same pears. So I'm first going to work on this one. So we're laying some green or some yellow down so that I can start to blend when I put the other colors. I kind of like the idea that on this one over here, see how it still has a little bit of the green tones in there and some tan tones before it goes up into the red part. Now, some pears are completely red when they're ripe, and I actually really like those. I don't have any growing like that, but I do like them. And so I'm going to put a little bit of green on my brush, and instead of brushing, I'm going to do a little more patting. And when you're patting, you don't really want too much water on your brush. But this is really a matter of layer upon layer. I'm going to grab a little tan, pat on there too, because this is going to be the darkest part of the pear. just pull it up into here a little bit so it can dry. I might put a little bit into here too. And then we're going to have to let that dry for a little bit. Then we're going to do a little bit over into here. When I'm doing this, I'm not adding any water to my brush. I like that halfway dry look of that it gives us. And my brush still has some yellow on it. It has a little bit of the tan and a little bit of that light green. I'll put a little bit in here too. And see how it starts to change itself. I think I'm going to have to change the lighting a little bit again. So I'm opening my blinds. I'm going to turn off the top light. Because I just find it's a little doing a little bit of reflection. See if I can tilt that. Maybe that makes it a little bit better. No. How's that? Better? Thanks, Living a Miracle Homestead. Thanks for stopping by. Okay, so we're just patting because we don't want lines at all with these colors because we want it to be that natural coloration. I'm going to add just a touch of red onto my brush. Now, red is a crazy color when you're painting with it. You're always better to start with a little and have to do a lot of painting versus starting with a lot and then having to let it dry. And it can be craziness. See how we can, I just don't know what is reflecting on there. Maybe it's just my computer screen. Adjust that a little bit more. But we're just going to add little bits of red at a time. Now, sometimes when I'm doing pears, I use a knife. And there's art knives that it gives you a whole different look. You can make some sharp lines with it, and it just changes, say, the pears that you're painting. And the palette knife is a unique way to do a painting. I'm going to grab a little tan because I need some distinction over here between these two pears. I have to say, this is when I really wish I had a nice camera. I mean, I do have a cell phone camera, which I use on most of my videos, but like right now, it's only hooked up to, it's attached, this is just a little camera attached to the computer. But I really wish at some point I'm going to buy a really nice camera. And I think it can really help with the videos. But that's just a process. And one of these days we'll get one. Can you guys tell me how much reflection you're seeing? Can you see the actual painting, or does it fade in and out and it gets too light colored for you? It's better with your shadow across it. Like when it's right now, Doug? When you're starting with YouTube, there's always just so many things that you want to get and try and have. But there's only so many dollars in a budget of YouTube. And so one day, I'm saving up. One day, I'm going to have a great camera. Okay, so they can see it well. I do wish it would zoom. This little camera that hooks to my computer, it won't zoom at all. I thought the same thing. It was just my camera on my phone, or not on my phone, on my computer stopped working. And Joe had this little one downstairs, and he says, well, you can use this one. And so I rarely use it. Usually I use my cell phone. But when it goes to be live on my cell phone, that's a difficult thing because I just have limited data. I did get an email from Verizon that says they have a thing that for $30 more, I could have unlimited data. And I really think I need to consider that so that I could do a live like this using my cell phone camera. So it's starting. The colors are starting to take those shapes. Now on a pear, a lot of times you can see the end of the pear. And so let's start putting those in because that will really help with our look. And we're just going to use some dark brown. And I think I better use a small brush just because my paint is so wet. But like right down here, we would have an end to the pear. And we would have one right in here. We would have some shadow around our stem. And we would have a shadow into this one too. And it's interesting with pears because they have so many spots. You know, tan spots, brown spots. Which is interesting for a yellow fruit to have it like that. But they do. It's really interesting when you start to study pears. So I'm going to throw that in there. I'm going to take a brush that I haven't even dipped in water. It's a flat too. And I'm just going to get a little bit of the medium brown and see how it's just a little teeny bit on there. There's not hardly any. But it will help when I want to just do some spots on the fruit. And I'll put it more than what I really will end up with because I'm going to add some yellow over top of them. But it helps with the shape and the coloration of the pears. Because all pears have so many different colors when you start to study them. And this brush doesn't have any water at all on it. All it has is that little bit of the medium brown. And then I'll grab a little bit of the yellow with that same brush with no water on it. And that way I can just kind of blend it in and around. And it just gives it a little bit different look. Now, if you're using a dry brush and it starts to get too much paint on it, you can literally just take a towel and just dry it. I mean, the towel is going to get all kinds of stuff on it, but let's see how it just starts to blend that in. I'm going to do a little bit of separation between these two pears. A little bit of covering where we put that brown. I'm just going to brush right over it. So it gives me some darkness, but it doesn't take away from the pear. Okay, so we're at 1 hour and 14 minutes right now. Let's see how now we can put a layer of yellow over top of most of the pear. And what we will come back and we're going to add more red in there, but it really gives it a thicker, richer colors in there. And then we'll let the pears dry and we can finish the plate. And then come back and finish the pears. Need a little bit of shadow on that pear that's going behind this front pear. I need a little more shadow there. I might have to go to the second brown instead, just because I just need more contrast. There. Okay, so we're getting much more contrast in between the pears. We have some coloration blending in there. Pull some more yellow into that. And we're going to let those sit because we need those to get a little bit drier before we can finish them. Sharpen my line there. And I'm going to have to sharpen my line right here too. Sorry, it'll be a weird angle for you guys. I need some sharpness over here. And the sharpness that I need to add is just because I got into the brown a little bit. Is that right or wrong? No, it just happens. That's just all that there is to it. It just happens. I need a little more distinction right there, so I'm going to add a little bit of red in there to separate those pears. Let's get some sharpness right here. Okay, so let's finish our plate, and then we can go back and finish our pears, and we should be done in less than a half hour. I'm rinsing out my brush, and I have a couple brushes sitting in there, so I'm gonna rinse those out too, just so that they're just not there. Now on the original painting over here, the plate starts with white, and then I added some tan in there. One, so that I could put darker shadows, and I just like the look of it. I could make it so that the center part looked a little more indented because of it. Now, if you don't want to use brown, you could, blues or grays work really well with whites. So I'm going to put the lids on these dark ones and grab my white plate. I am using a smaller brush, but all my blue should be dry, so I don't have to worry about when I go to touch that. Now, if you want things to go inward or outward, your brush stroke can help you with that. And so after I paint the layer of white again, I'm going to add some tan so that you can see that. Or I could do it in blue too. But I think I'll do it in tan like the other painting. So it's just a little bit more of the white. We want to make sure that we cover up any of our marker lines, because we don't want the marker shining through. If I was doing a regular painting and I wasn't doing a video with it, I would easily just use a light pencil, and that way I would know where my starting points and stop points were, but it would make it much easier to cover up because the pencil will cover up so easily. Doug, is Sandy Wilkerson in here? I see that you're saying hi to her. Thanks, Day. Day is Monty's in Motion. And she just won some gifts from me. So that's very exciting. Okay, so we have our layer of white on there. And we're going to add a little bit of tan in there because that's what we did in the big painting. So I'm going to grab a little bit of that. Now, if I want things to start on the plate to look like it's indented or changed, like I would, if I think this part of the plate is more indented than the other part, I'm going to have that darker. Now, it may look really dark to you right now, but I am just going to blend that around, and it won't after just a little bit. But if I make it so that it's a straight line right along here, then your eye will go, oh, that's the rim is up above, so we're going to make the rim go like it's spinning, you know, it's circling the plate. And then we can blend that shadowy part right in there. We got to take it over to the sides. And we'll make it a little darker into this part. And then we're just going to blend it over on the sides. let's make a shadow right here. So we're making a shadow of the pear. So the pear is coming along here. Let's make it come up, and it's going to become a shadow onto the rim even. So I am going to make it dark right there. And I'm actually using a mixture of purple and white right now. And that way, when it dries, I can put that light tan over it, and it will really turn into a nice shadow. I'm going to put some over here, because we have to do something dark enough so that it really defines the different the pears, the plates. So we're just going to put that in there and let that dry a little bit. And I know sometimes it feels like, gosh, you're doing this and this and this and this. But it's just a process in a painting, because you want it to have definition and shadow. You want to be able to go, okay, that pear is sitting on that plate next to that one. And so you just have to see how the light bounces, or how you want it to bounce. The plate is going to dry just a little bit. And we're going to finish our pears. Okay, so this pear right here is going to be a red pear. So we're going to add some more red in there. And when you're adding the final colors of it, then you can really do like indentations and really get it to, I guess, pop. So I'm laying down some red. Then we'll grab our yellow, a little bit water on our paintbrush. And we can just really have those colors pop out. We're going to put a little bit of red on this one. I'm going to make that have a little indentation right here. Because unlike an apple or a grape, pears just have so many different bulges. They have bulges on the bottoms. They have bulges on the tops. It's really quite amazing, the Pear. Now, one of the things you won't see on this painting yet, because it has to completely dry, is the white accents that I'll add. But I will post when I get all the way, done with that and I have it all sealed before I mail it over to Janie. I'll post that so that you can see, because as paint dries, it changes. And that's a great benefit of painting, that it changes, and then you put that sealer on and all that color pops back out, and it is truly amazing. Okay, this back one, we're actually going to add some green in there. Like, it's not quite ripe yet. So we're going to add some green. Because even when pears are not ready, they have greens and yellows in them. We'll add a little bit of greens down into the bottoms of our pears. Yep, I can see it coming together. I'm going to put those in the water so I can finish my plate. Monty in Motion says, blending is always my nemesis. I can understand that sometimes. So we just want to blend and finish this plate. I lifted up a little bit of blue. That surprised me that it was still wet there. But that's something I can easily fix after it gets all the way dry. Let's see if I can get this at a good angle for you. So there we are for right now. I do have to let it completely dry, and I can add some white accents and a little bit of my dotting. But this is a painting in an hour and a half. I will post later on today when it gets all the way dry and I have all the white specks in there and stuff. Because when you go to do the white on the reflections on a painting, you paint it and then it starts to dry. And you have to paint it again and it starts to dry. And you have to paint it again. because the white wants to soak into any color that's underneath of it. But Janie, thanks for the idea of painting a still life, and I appreciated it. And when it gets all the way done and dry and I seal it, I'll send it off to you. Everybody, thanks for being in the live today. I appreciate it. That was fun. And I picked a different spot to paint in because I thought the light would be better, but I'm not necessarily sure that was the correct decision. But we'll see how it looks when I watch the replay on it. But everybody, thanks so much. Janie, I'm glad you love it, and you will love it even more when it gets completely finished with the little tiny extras. And I will see you guys next time. Thanks so much. I'm glad that you needed something relaxing. Thank you so much for that, Janie.